Welcome to Humble Beginnings, a podcast where we uncover the unconventional, more relatable paths to success. In this show, we'll share the stories before the C-suites, board memberships, and appointments, the stories of various upbringings, first jobs, career pivots, educational uncertainties, and more. This is the place to hear about their lives from the GovCon executives themselves. We hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humble Beginnings. I'm your host, Amanda Ziadeh, and back with me today as a co-host is Mark HuYoung, managing partner of executive advisory firm Northwind Partners. And we're both excited to be joined by our guest today, Jon Rucker, CEO of Ultra Intelligence and Communications. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Appreciate you having me today. Mark, good to see you again.
Hey, you too, John. Thanks, Amanda. Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, you too. All right. So, Jon, we typically start by talking about your background. So tell us a bit about your upbringing in Northern Virginia. I understand your mom was a teacher, your dad was an electrical engineer, and I'm curious how perhaps their professions and your upbringing in the DMV impacted you.
Yeah, so, I'm one of those strange people who's actually from the DC area. It seems like when you live here, you meet so many people that aren't from here. But I did grow up here. Yeah, it's true. My mother was a kindergarten teacher for, I think, 40 plus years. And so, in our home, education was super critical. It was treated with the highest regard. It was we were always told it was our job. It was a thing we had to focus on. It was always a priority in the house. My father was an electrical engineer. It was a fascinating story for him. He worked as an electrical engineer for many, many years. He actually ran the electrical design department at Marriott Hotels, but he never actually had an electrical engineering degree. He was a electronics specialist, and he ran across a manager of an electrical engineering department who wanted somebody to work for him who kind of did things his way. So he taught my father how to do it all, and he really learned it from the ground up. So it's really fascinating. My mother being an educator, my father doing a pretty high level job that he wasn't actually technically educated for, but it learned it on the fly. So it was certainly very interesting. They're always very encouraging and always pressing my sister and I to do the most with what we could.
Awesome. Yeah. Were there any specific values or approaches to life that your parents taught you at a young age that have stuck with you?
Yeah, a couple things. First, my mother always said, it's a competitive world out there. Start by being the most educated person in the room, if you can help it. So, whether it be undergrad, graduate school, continuous learning, that was always pushed. And then the other thing was, both my parents pushed us hard. My mother in particular would push on, you need to move ahead. So when something would happen that was disappointing or that was frustrating, you got a little bit of time to kind of feel sorry for yourself, like, maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And then somewhere in there, usually she would say, okay, you done feeling sorry for yourself? Great. Now what do we do next? And so it was, yeah, they always instilled those values. And of course, values of credibility, being honest, being trustworthy. These were always big things that they pushed.
Awesome. And we'll definitely come back to those values and multiple parts of your life and your career later on. But I wanted to note, I was going through your LinkedIn, just, brushing up on your story, and I noticed that you were involved with Taekwondo and Boy Scouts. So I was curious how these activities impacted you when you were young, or if there are any other activities that you were involved with at a young age that, have influenced you.
Yeah. So both were interesting. Taekwondo was my mother's response to me getting pushed around at the bus stop one day. And she said, well, this is ridiculous. And of course, my father was like, well, you got to be able to defend yourself. So they put my sister and I into a Taekwondo school. Any sort of martial art, I think, teaches you discipline. It teaches you a degree of confidence. And it teaches you how to work hard to earn something. Those are physical skills and mental skills you can only earn through practicing and working out and working hard. Scouts was something I always loved to do. I'm an enormous believer in the Boy Scouts. Today, I earned my Eagle Scout when I was latter part of middle school or early high school. Today, I'm the committee chair for the Scout troop that my two oldest sons are in. I'm a big believer that scouting not only teaches great life skills and reinforces those skills. It also really enforces this concept that it's about the journey, not so much the destination. Yes, you can earn your Eagle Scout, but the journey to get there is super critical. Yes, you can earn this merit badge, but the journey to get there is what's important and what you learned along the way. And I think it applies. And I think it applies to life.
Awesome.
John, it sounds like our parents may have gone to the same school of teaching hard work and persistence, which candidly, I think you see it the same way, has really kind of helped shape who we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And owe them, significant amount of credit. What drew you to attending VTech and to studying aerospace engineering in particular?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. So growing up, I've always been a football fan. So I was actually a big Penn State fan growing up. And I was absolutely bent that I was going to go to Penn State. And so I applied and I got in state college. My parents wanted me to also look at some in-state schools. And so they had me apply at Virginia Tech. And I'll try to not gag when I say the University of Virginia. I applied there as well, right? But as a Virginia Tech guy, that's a hard one to swallow that I did, but I did apply there. I mean, I was accepted, by the way, for all the UVA people out there that would say, what, you weren't good enough, right? And so once I got into Penn State and Virginia Tech, I'd liked both when I visited them. And so my parents did one of the coolest things parents could do. We drove on, I think it was a Friday night or Friday morning, maybe. We drove up to State College, and then we toured the campus, and then we drove well into the night down to Blacksburg so that we could tour the campus there the next day, because my father said, I want you to see them back right next to each other. And as much as I loved Penn State, I remember having this strange feeling of, it's going to sound really weird because I do love Penn State, but it felt like there was these big, tall parking garages and there was lots of sidewalks, and Blacksburg was just much more kind of out there in the mountains, and it just felt more like home. And so made the decision to go there. In part my parents, of course, there was also a financial consideration, right, of the difference in cost between going out of state and in state. But fundamentally, it was really, I liked the campus down in Blacksburg just so much more. And so decided to do that. Aerospace engineering was a little bit of a different story. So I always knew I wanted to be an engineer. I was good at math, good at science. And I got down there, and sometime in your freshman year, they start going through the different programs. Well, at that point in time, the aerospace engineering program at Virginia Tech was, top 5 kind of programs in the country in terms of rated engineering schools. And so, of course, the first thing becomes, look, only the best of our students get into the aerospace program. Okay, great. Sign me up, because now you just said that was hard and I want to do it. And then what was actually funny about it was I ended up with what they called a dual major in ocean engineering, which meant you didn't do most of the normal electives that people would do. Instead, you took required classes so that you could get most of a second major. And why did I do that? Well, because they said, now, for those of you coming into the aerospace program, we also offer ocean. You could do one or the other. Or if you want, there is a way in 4 years to get a dual major in ocean engineering. But it's really, really hard, and you're going to have to work hard to do it. And we don't really recommend it for most people. So one of the fastest ways to get me to do something is to tell me it's hard, or to suggest perhaps I can't do it. And then that really pushes me into it. So I wish I could tell you something. And I always loved airplanes, by the way. I always thought airplanes were cool, which was also good for me, and it fit. But the truth of the matter is, it was a mix of I loved airplanes and a really big ego at the time that said, I have to do this because it's super hard. So,
wow. Man, it sounds like you just love a challenge. In some circles, you might be considered a glutton for punishment, right?
Yes, yeah.
Pursuing not just the hardest degree, but the hardest degree, with an additional degree piled on.
Right. Well, let's not forget I have 3 sons, so definitely glutton for punishment at times.
No doubt. So, John, you joined Lockheed Martin right after undergrad, and you spent almost 2 decades there. How'd you get your start there, and ultimately move up to aerospace and defense?
Yeah. So when I was coming out of school, I started looking around for jobs and applied a bunch of different places. And I got a call from a close family friend, a guy named Tim Parker, who was in the aerospace engineer, was in the aerospace industry for a number of years, or for his whole career, really. And he said, "Hey, there's a job fair at our office here in Gaithersburg on whatever day, and you should come up and be part of that." And so, he got me in there, got me introduced to a few people, and that turned into a really cool job offer to go work on this R&D program on a new technology for radar. And so I got into there. Of course, mind you, wasn't doing anything related to aerospace engineering. I was doing electrical engineering, which was how eventually I ended up deciding to go to Johns Hopkins and get an electrical engineering master's degree, because I wasn't doing aerospace, I was doing electrical. And so worked through that, eventually worked my way through a number of different really, really interesting programs. And then eventually started moving toward realizing I wanted to do leadership roles on programs. And so started moving toward that. And of course, once again, back to my mother saying, if you're going to compete, always be super educated. So I'd finished my EE master's. So then I went to Penn State to get an MBA, because I figured, okay, if you're going to compete with business people, go get an MBA, and started moving toward program roles. And eventually ended up on a big Army program called WIN-T, which it turned out to be, just a really big shaping point for me, because I went from working in the program office to being the deputy program manager to being program manager to eventually being the executive over the business that was in. And it was really incredible. So what I always tell folks about places like Lockheed is their mentoring, coaching, and continuing education internal programs are just absolutely outstanding in terms of bringing you along, helping you understand your strengths and working with those places that you need to really improve in any kind of a skill, including personal style, leadership style. They really, really work on that stuff with you, which really has I think been lessons that I carry with me even to this day that I use. When I left WIN-T, I worked a couple other programs, and then eventually ended up pursuing a large international direct commercial sale capture in Australia, which turned into, give or take, 5 years of my life and countless hundreds of thousands of miles on United, going back and forth. It was really, really, again, another highly developmental opportunity for me. I always tell people in this industry that are coming up, if you want to learn how a business truly works, go get yourself in the middle of a capture. You have to learn about everything from competitive environment, to what the customer's thinking, to how to read an RFP, to terms and conditions. You have to understand how your rates work and how to write BOEs so that you can explain the details of an estimate, how to do bills of material, and all sorts of things like that are really, really interesting. And it was a really, really, truly great experience. I loved all the time I was at Lockheed, and like I said, lessons that I carry with me absolutely to this day that I leverage probably every day in my role.
Awesome. I don't want to throw us off track, but I did have a question. I'm usually pretty curious about people's college experiences, just because a lot of people in this industry study similar, not the hardest degree in school, but electrical engineering and MBAs and things like that. Did you work at all while you were pursuing the hardest degree at your campus?
So while I was at Virginia Tech, I worked over the summers when I was off of school. But my parents were very good about that. I came from a middle class family. We didn't have everything, but we had enough. And so my folks wanted to make sure that when I was at school, I could focus on my schoolwork. So I was taking, 17, 18 credit hour semesters. Once I pushed through a 20 credit hour semester to get some things done. But I did have jobs over the summer. I worked probably most of when I was in college. I worked at the Champ Sports at the mall. Which was, you're selling sports gear. It's kind of a fun place to hang out. When it's busy, there's a lot to do. And when it's not busy, there's baseball gloves and baseballs And I can absolutely tell you, I remember one day being in there and the manager of the store who he'd been a pitcher at Florida State, when he was in college. And he'd blown his arm out, but it was really, really quiet. And he's throwing these crazy curveballs in the store, which was really interesting. And so I, did that. I had one summer, that I worked in an office, for a small company that's sort of on the outskirts of our industry, just through a family friend that we knew. And it was really interesting. But it was just the one summer that they were hiring interns. So then I went back and worked at the mall, which was certainly a very interesting, experience when you're doing everything from running shoes in the stock room onto the shelves to folding clothes to selling people the newest pairs of Air Jordans. So it was certainly very interesting. And then Lockheed picked up the bill for when I did both my master's at Hopkins and my MBA at Penn State. And so so you're working full time and doing your homework at nights and on the weekends and attending class in those same windows. So you're definitely working pretty hard in life at that point.
And retail kind of gives you a different set of skills at a younger age, I think. You're in front of people constantly and there's different kinds of responsibilities that I think.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I used to, more often than not, I was out on the floor selling. So the manager would assign you to different things. And, so when the shipment came in from the truck, there was definitely a couple of us that were always tasked with going back there and unboxing it all and getting it put into storage and all those sorts of things. But most of the rest of the time when I was out there, on the actual floor, he would have me tasked to be out selling, in the primary parts of the store. To a store like that, at least at the time, it was shoes was where they really made good money. People come in and some of them know what they want right away. I want a pair of the new Jordans and a 9.5. Bring them out in the box and I'll take them home. And they're not even try them on, right? Other people walk in and they don't know what they need, right? I like to walk every day. I like to play basketball. I like to run. whatever. And you have to help them through, how to get to what they want, and more importantly, make sure they don't go down the hall to Foot Locker, and buy whatever they have, which was really strange because Foot Locker and Champ Sports were owned by the same parent company, but you wanted to sell it out of the store. And we weren't commissioned. You couldn't be commissioned when you were part time, but the managers of the stores were definitely commissioned on what got sold out of it. So and you learn to talk to absolutely every kind of person you could imagine because you meet a little bit of everybody. And this was the time before the way we shop now, which is on Amazon, right? And it was in time when you wanted to buy something, you want to buy a new pair of shoes, like the sports store at the mall was where I think most people did.
That's a spot. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing a bit about that. Yeah, I was just curious. Always interesting to know how people spend their free time in college, especially when they're heads down in studying books.
Well, I would have never gone out and thrown a football around when there was homework to do. Certainly would have never gone and had a few drinks with friends on the weekends or anything.
Never.
Like that. I was always very, very focused on my studies. I tried to get. It was another funny thing about education that both my parents also used to always remind me of was, again, back to this thing. It's about the journey, not just the destination. So they did always encourage, hey, just make sure you're not so busy studying and going to class all the time that you're not enjoying the time when you're at school, because it lasts briefly and then it's on for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And mental health is part of the process. So awesome. All right. Well, to put us back in the trajectory of your career, I understand after Lockheed, you landed at SAIC. Tell us a bit about the progression of your career at SAIC, and I understand your boss there had a pretty impactful experience on you.
So I loved being at Lockheed. I don't think I ever thought that I would leave. I left not long before the effective divestiture of IS and GS, and it was sort of a mix of things. I was doing a lot of international travel at the time. I mean, all three of my boys were born while I was going back and forth to Australia and other parts of the world. They all look like me, so no concerns about anything there.
Good signs.
But they but I was gone a lot. I didn't want to be an absentee father. It was pretty clear that I was probably going to continue to do international for a while. There was the pending divestiture, which, you talk to different people. Those are interesting experiences to go through and sometimes bumpy experiences. And frankly, I was reaching a place where I was realizing that I had experience on development programs. I didn't at a big company. I didn't have more mid-sized company experience. I didn't have services experience. There were other things I hadn't done. And so those pieces together started motivating the idea of perhaps it's time to think about branching out and learning something new. So talked to a bunch of different places, ended up at CACI. I have always had a ton of respect for Ken Asbury and John Mengucci. I really, really liked the direction they were taking the company, and it was a great opportunity for me because I was coming from a world where we did development programs, and CACI was trying to grow from being a services company into providing more solutions. I wanted to learn services. They needed people that knew how to do solutions. This is great, right? So I can go learn a services business while helping them with what I know how to do, just go grow more solutions oriented, higher margin kind of programs. So I went over to CACI, worked with just a bunch of really, really great people there. And yeah, one of my bosses along the way was a guy named Nick Farah. And for those people who know Nick, Nick's a unique personality. You will never forget him when you meet him. Once you've worked for Nick, he's famous for reminding you that you always work for Nick. I'm like, if Nick called me right now, it would be really, really hard to tell you. We have to pause the podcast so I can pick up the phone, but we might have to do that, right? When I first worked for Nick, I couldn't stand it. It was just like, this is crazy. This is like, he was just so fast all the time, and there was so much going on. And then one day he sat me down and we had a brief conversation, and he said, "Hey, I'm pushing you hard and I'm giving you a hard time because I see a lot of potential in you. And you have the ability to go be a CEO someday. But there are some things that are going to hold you back. So let's fix that." And so we worked together. I got an executive coach, and it changed my whole perspective. I thought he was being hard on me because that's just the way he was. I didn't realize he was being hard on me because he saw potential and saw what could come from it. Nick is probably my favorite boss I've ever had. I consider him an absolute friend. I would put my children on an airplane alone down to Texas to go stay with Nick and his wife. That's the extent to which I trust him. We're just really, really close. I still call him at times for advice on things. And Nick not only taught me how to be a great just general business leader. He taught me so much about how to take care of people. How can you be tough with your people, but also have a great culture and have the people love working there and love you as a boss all at the same time while you're being tough about things. He taught me, I've always been pretty demanding, but he taught me even more about how to be more demanding. He taught me how to go compete and win in the DoD environment, how to take a situation that doesn't look like you can win, and how do you shape that opportunity, build a customer relationship the way it needs to be, and go and go win. He taught me a ton about what really makes businesses work, the underpinnings of the financials and why they matter, and how and how to look at it. So yeah, just a great guy, and somebody that Nick's always going to be on the Mount Rushmore for me. When the success I have or that I've had since I've worked for Nick is just absolutely so much a credit to him from what I learned from him.
Nick's one of the good ones, John. You
Yeah.
I know he'd love to hear that, and I'm sure you've shared that with him. And that's what he's always been known for, just the care and concern, and cared feeding of not just folks in his organization, but friends in the market. And to your point, you always know if you were going to be in his neck of the woods down in Texas, that he always had probably an amazing meal and a nice bottle of wine and a guest bed waiting for you to come and hang out with him.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And God forbid you offer to pay or you even try to pay when you're out
Yeah.
for drinks or
He
dinner.
He wouldn't even let you.
You get it right. Yeah. You don't want to have that conversation because he's not going to have it for very long.
That's right.
But yeah, he's a truly fantastic guy. I love him like a brother.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's incredible the difference that someone can make in your life when they invest in your potential in your career. So that's a cool story. So why did you then leave CACI for SAIC during the pandemic, I believe? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And so I wasn't looking to leave. I loved being there. I was really, really happy there. And I got a call one day. So Gabe Camarillo, who is now the Undersecretary of the Army, was leading the Army business at SAIC, which was at the time, 1.2, 1.3 billion a year. I was running maybe 700 at CACI. But Gabe was getting ready to go into the confirmation process, and they were looking for somebody to lead the Army business. And it was a larger business, which was an interesting opportunity. I love Nick to death, and at the same time, he encouraged me to consider the opportunity because the great thing about working for somebody like Nick is you learn a ton. The challenge is that because he's such a big personality, you are in the shadow of that to some extent, and so you do need to take that step out on your own and show folks that you can do these things yourself. And so it was a great opportunity there. That business, about half of it was IT services. Again, I'd never done IT services. So it was a great opportunity for me to go learn what that was about and how that worked. While also SAIC was looking at how to get into more solution-oriented work. The other thing that really intrigued me about it, so I worked for a guy named Bob Genter when I was there. It's also a fantastic dude, like him a lot. He's really, really great boss. When I met with Bob to talk about the job, what he emphasized was the business. What Gabe has been working on is getting this business back to growth, this Army business back to growth, because it hasn't been on the growth trajectory we need it to be on. And Gabe's taken the first steps. We now need somebody to take the rest of the steps that need to be taken to get that Army business to growth. Well, okay, so I can learn IT services. I can go run a big portfolio. I can get out there on my own to do it, and it's a business that needs an upward trajectory on growth, and it was like, okay. I mean, it was there was a lot of thoughts about it, and leaving the people that I knew at CACI and leaving Nick was really, really hard. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, it was sort of a no-brainer, right? You look at it and you go, okay, it all adds up. And my wife and I sat down and talked about it and said, let's go do this. It was weird timing during the pandemic to make a job change like that. But it was really super exciting. And I've often told people that changing jobs during the pandemic was interesting. You could write a book about what that looked like. When the person you're backfilling is going to be the second highest civilian in your one and only customer, you could write a book about that being interesting, right? When you're going through that's really, really fascinating. So it was cool. And then of course the third part that I talk about was I was at SAIC for about a month when I was diagnosed with colon cancer. So it was as you'd imagine, you're 1 month into a job, right? And there's no book out there that tells you what to do about that, right? There's books that tell you about transitioning jobs. They don't tell you about pandemics. They don't tell you about the person you're backfilling is going to be a really high level executive with your customer. And they sure as hell don't tell you when you're a month in what to do when you're diagnosed with a life-changing or potentially life-changing illness. And so so it was really a challenging time. So, the first thing that I would say, and Amanda, we certainly can talk more about the cancer situation. The first thing I will describe is that SAIC was incredible. Everybody there was awesome. They were all willing to jump in. The people there were fantastic. There was a lady there I was working with at the time named Stephanie Easter, who many folks know, longtime executive in government. I love Stephanie. She's just fantastic. She was immediately willing to step in if there was anything that I couldn't do because I had to go for medical appointments. The people all the way up to Nazik, who was the CEO at the time, were fantastic. I'll never forget the email that I got from Nazik. It said, if there's anything you need from your SAIC family, just ask. More often than not, people say, if there's something you need, let me know, which is a great way of, let me know. I mean, it might be a little bit of a bother. Maybe I'll help you. Maybe I won't. That's not what it was. If there's something you need, just ask. And the implication there is, and we'll take care of it. So SAIC was fantastic. I cannot say enough about the people at SAIC. The cancer thing was, it was stage 3B colon cancer. So I had to go through a partial colon resection, which I would equate to getting hit by a truck. That's sort of what you feel like when you're done. You get to the other end of it. So I did that. Let's see, I think the diagnosis was on the 1st of December of 2021. On the 15th of December, I had the colon surgery. And then in the first part or middle of January, because the next step is they have to give you chemo. So middle of January, I went in and they put a Metaport in, which they use to, they take this big needle and they kind of put it in the upper corner of your chest. And that's the quick way to access your bloodstream without having to put in an IV every time. And so had that put in and then started chemo within a week. I think it was Martin Luther King. That holiday was the first day I went in for surgery. Just have to remember it was a holiday. And they go through that. I went through, I think they call it 6 cycles, but it's 12 treatments. So it was twice a month for 6 months. And you go in for a couple hours and they give you stuff. First they give you a bunch of stuff to tell you this is to help make you not sick from the chemo. And now here's stuff that makes the chemo work better. And now we're going to start putting in the actual chemo. And then there was one you had to take home. I got this little baseball size thing. God, I used to call it my door prize. I would joke with the nurses, but you got this little baseball size thing because one of them, the way the drug worked, they had to pump it into you over the course of 48 hours. So you'd go home on Monday, you'd carry it with you, and then you'd have to have this thing attached to you for the next 2 days. And then Wednesday, you'd go back in and they disconnect the thing, flush your port. Once you wisen up and you learn how to do it, right? So no matter what the things are in life, there are tricks of the trade you learn. And one of the tricks of the trade you learn is when the nurse says, after they unplug you, hey, do you want a bag of saline? The answer is yes, because the chemo dehydrates the heck out of you. And so they'll pump like a liter of saline into you and you do feel significantly better. But went through that for 6 months. I worked the whole time. The weeks that I was on chemo, I worked as much as I could, usually 2-3 days. I'd be able to work. It got harder toward the end. Toward the end, it was really, really tough to work. Any of the first 3 days of the week, I usually by about Thursday started feeling better. But I was still getting in over a 2-week period, 65, 70 hours, sometimes a little bit more. Couldn't do a lot of overtime because it makes you pretty tired. But the weeks that were off weeks from the chemo, you felt much better. I mean, I'd go play golf on the weekend or, try to do things. You have to be a little careful about what you do because, your immune system is down and all those sorts of things. But, it was a really, really interesting challenge, but worked all the way through it. We accomplished a lot of really great things. The team was fantastic. I got really, really comfortable working remote, because it was what you had to do for your own health reasons. The nurses and the doctors were all absolutely, absolutely incredible. They saved my life. They really did. Family and friends were all really great through the whole thing. That was fantastic. And then, I guess the only thing I would say on that, and then we can talk, what other, where else you want to go with that. But the big thing that I would tell folks is the biggest lesson is, everybody knows what it feels like to go to a doctor and say, hey, my finger is bothering me, my ear is bothering me. And the doctor looks at you sort of dismissively, looks at it really quickly and goes, you're fine, don't worry about it. Yeah, I know that stinks, and yeah, I know that's embarrassing. When there's something that's bothering you, go see the doctor right away, because better to have them look at you and say, this is nothing, than it is to miss something that's important, right? And I never had anything really, really significant, but I had some minor things that, had those gotten checked out, maybe they would have caught it earlier. And let me tell you, stage 0 cancer is better than stage 1, which is better than stage 2, which is better than stage 3B, which means it's in your lymph nodes, right? So there's all that. As for where we're at with it all, and then I'll shut up and see what questions you guys have about it. But as for where we're at with it all, I finished chemo in the middle of 2022, so I'm now pushing up on 19 months past finishing chemo. 1 year is really statistically significant for it not coming back. 2 years is even more statistically significant. They do CT scans regularly. I am probably one of the best medically watched people in the world in terms of them checking on things. But I get some blood tests that you do some DNA test that they can do, where they can look for DNA from the cancer in your bloodstream. That's continued to be negative. So far so good. You have to go 5 years with nothing coming back before they say that you're considered cured. But certainly feeling really good about it. So yeah, it was an interesting time at SAIC, and I just would go back and say cannot say enough about how fantastic the folks there were.
Jon, that is amazing. I'm going to jump off track a little bit here too, and just share something I haven't shared. Well, it's not mine to share necessarily, but my wife actually around that same area battled cancer this last year. And so she's on the tail end of that now. And just as, is your character, Jon, obviously just saying, hey, I'm not going to let this get me down. This is something that I have no doubt was tough on Colleen and your boys, but they know who you are. They knew you were going to be a fighter and to get through it. But just to have gone through that, watching somebody you care about go through that, I know that was a tough thing. I'm not surprised that even as late stage as it was, that you came out the other end and says, hey, we're just going to do the best we can. We're going to shoulder down, get through it. I'm even shocked to hear you say, but I know that's what you shared before, that you didn't stop working to deliver results for SAIC while you underwent treatment. But, it does change the way you think about life and things and your perspective. And I would be curious to kind of know, when you, not just when you got that diagnosis, but then as you went through treatment, how did that, if at all, how did that shift your perspective or just your general mindset about how you approach things?
Yeah. Well, first, Mark, let me say I'm sorry to hear you're going through that in your family. I certainly wish you and your wife all the best on that. It's a really tough situation. So a couple things, right? The first thing is, it reinforces what we all fundamentally know but ignore on a day-to-day basis, which is we are in fact mortal, part of being human. Now we all know that, but when you're really faced with things and your mortality is in front of you, it really truly brings that into perspective. And so I remember having a conversation with my wife about it, and just in the first couple of days and you're dealing with it, and worked hard. I'd accomplished a lot in my career. A good job, and we're very fortunate in a lot of ways. But I remember saying, but what am I supposed to say to our boys? Our boys are 9, 11, and 13 right now. So they were 7, 9, and 11. I said, what am I supposed to say to the boys? It's okay, boys. Don't worry that dad might not make it. It's okay. I had a good job. You guys will be fine. And you know what? It sounds good and it feels good every day when you go home and you say, well, I have a great job and I get paid well to do it. And my family will always be taken care of. It's a different thing when you think about it because you realize what they really want and need is you there. They don't need everything else, right? So the first thing is it reinforces the importance of being there, right? So I've always been a person that believed in show up and be present, but I'm super big on, I don't miss my kids' games if I can help it. I don't miss things that I try really, really hard to not miss things because I'm working if I can possibly help it. The second thing is as you start to kind of get your arms around what's happening, to some extent I still haven't totally got my arms around what I went through, but you at some point in there, you have to decide and understand that it's it or you, right? Either the cancer is going to win or you're going to win. And I'll be damned if I was going to let the cancer win, right? I was like, okay, well, that's not happening. And so you go after it and you just set this mindset of here's what we're going to do. And, my wife, God bless her. I mean, she was so incredibly fantastic through the whole thing. And helped with the tough conversations, right? When you going through the process of having each of your kids one at a time as they start to process what's happening, come and ask the question in some version of, hey, Dad, isn't cancer something that can make you die? And have that conversation with your kids. It changes your perspective on so many things. But what's interesting about it is it doesn't make me want to work less. It makes me appreciate what I do more. It also has taught me that what we do is super important. But what's happening day in and day out is not actually the end of the world. If you take a risk and that risk is not successful, that's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? Right? Nobody's going to end up with cancer. Nobody's going to die because of it, right? So it got me so much more comfortable with living in the pressure of our business and appreciating that what we do is important and what we deliver for our customers is critical. And I have the deepest respect and deepest appreciation for the customers that we serve. But it helps you go through each day with that perspective of there really are worse things than you missed your revenue by $2 million, or then you lost this bid, or you weren't successfully able to hire that person you were looking for. Of course, with Northwind, Mark, we were always able to hire the people that you guys help us with. We never have any issues there, so I never worry about it with Northwind, but every place else, but all good. So yeah, so that was and we could go on about it in terms of I could go on forever about that topic because it really does change you and appreciate and help you appreciate every day more than just the stresses and all the things that we tend to focus on.
Wow. Jon, thanks for sharing all that perspective. That's extremely meaningful and really, really glad to hear. Obviously, remission, you're cancer free. Obviously, it needs to be monitored. I've heard those things. I'm thankful to say on our end, we're in that same place, like in terms of the tail end that my wife responded well to treatment. They expect her to be cancer free probably by the March timeframe. And boy, it just gives you so much to be thankful for. And it's interesting, the genesis of our connection is right around the time that you were finishing treatment. You got engaged with Jon over here on our end, who's a good friend of yours now, and got contacted about an opportunity at Ultra.
Jon's a fantastic guy. He's one of my favorite people in this industry, and he understood what I'd just been through, but started telling me about the opportunity and said, "Look, I think this is really something that you could do. I think you'd be good at it. I think you'd really like it. And it's just really a incredible opportunity. And I know you're just coming off of this, and I know the timing is awful, but I'd like to say he said something like really easy, like, so I really think you should consider it. I think he said something more like, so if you don't really seriously consider this, I'm going to question your judgment. I think it was something more like that. So it was really like, I'm going to get right here in your face, which is what a friend does sometimes, right? To make sure that you're willing to listen. Because he knew that I felt a lot of loyalty to SAIC, and leaving would be really, really hard. But started into the process. I never thought in a million years that they would give me the job. Not because I didn't think I could do it, because I figured being this close to coming off of cancer treatment, they're a private equity company, there's just no way. And so I made sure that Karen Bamba, who's our board chair, knew what was going on. I made sure Mike Marshall, who's the sponsor over at Advent, knew what was going on. And I think it was about the second or third time I brought it up, because it was almost like maybe they're not hearing me. I don't remember if it was Karen or Mike, but one of them said, okay, yeah, our view of that is looking at the results you delivered when you were at SAIC and you were going through cancer treatment. If that's what you're going to do when you don't feel well and you're dealing with all that in your life, what are you going to do when you're feeling great? So it to them was a strength, not a risk, which was incredible for me. It was really incredible. And so I love the opportunity. As I've described in other for other jobs as I moved along the way, I'm an enormous believer in pursuing experience over title. So yes, being a CEO was always an objective, and something that that I wanted to do, but it wasn't the primary reason to take the job. Product company, I'd never been at a true product company before, certainly not in the middle of a product business. That was a fascinating opportunity to learn. The work we do is absolutely right at the heart of where I've spent most of my career. Today we call it CJAD C2, but it's at the heart of delivering comms capability, delivering encryption capability to secure those comms, and delivering software that ties all that data together across the battle space. And these are products that are in the middle of critical programs, large systems around the world. And private equity. So I was like, okay, it's cool work. It's private equity, which I've always been really interested in seeing what that was like, and trying that. And then the business is a business where really what it needs is the outsized growth. It's fundamentally a sound business. It's a good business with great people and great products, but lacking the growth trajectory that a business like this should be on. And I was like, that was probably one of the easiest decisions I ever made. It was hard to leave SAIC. It was really, really hard. Go talk to Bob Genter and ask him. I was probably shaking when I was in his office because they were so good to me. It felt awful telling them I was going to leave. And they all understood it. I had lunch with Nazak a couple of months ago, and she said, no, we all understood. This is an opportunity you couldn't turn down. It was a great decision on your part. But in terms of the career decision, it was just that next opportunity to learn something cool and go work at a great place. And so at the end of the day, it was a pretty straightforward decision. And I'm about a year into it now. I'm a little more than a year into it now, which is really great. I've been looking back on what you've accomplished over the first year in a role like this is really fascinating, to see how far you've come, and then to look at the future of the things you're doing when you're shaping a company, and you're shaping the future. And it's really exciting, and it's a ton of fun. And I can honestly say it is the most fun job I've ever had. It really is.
It's great.
Awesome. I keep thinking when we talk about, the results that you were still able to see at SAIC, the fact that you kept working during your treatment, the thing your mom kind of instilled in you, going back to the beginning of our conversation, where it would have been a completely reasonable time of life to kind of put things aside and not, let it defeat you, but accept that, some people don't work during this time and things like that. You didn't, and you you kind of had the challenge and you still pushed through it. So I was thinking back to that.
Yeah, that thing of are you done feeling sorry for yourself was a critical skill to have. Um, you know, uh, it's about the journey, not the end game, and that's hard when you're dealing with something like cancer, um, because you're only thinking about the end game, which is I just want to get to the point where I'm okay. The reality is there's important parts of the journey as well. There's things that, there's things that you learn, right? I love to play golf. I'm not real great at it. But you know what? It's not the end of the world when you smack the ball off into the woods. It really isn't. There's worse things that can happen, right? You feel well enough to be out there that day. So those things, the skills with my parents, don't let it get you down, keep driving. You can't let it beat you, which was part of continuing working, right? Just staying busy and feeling productive through it, because stopping working would have felt like admitting that maybe the cancer was going to win. And what if you stop working and then that's it? You can't go back later. No, I'm going to keep going at it until I offered me a leave of absence if I wanted one, but it just was, to your point, those things, they come back around. The skills you learn from your parents, from great mentors and friends, people like Nick that teach you these skills along the way. These things all come together in those really, really hard personal times. And if you had told me in December of 2021 that in December of 2023, I would have been almost a year into, actually, I'd have been a little over a year into being the CEO of a company, I wouldn't have even known how to process that. But you keep fighting, and you don't know what life's going to bring you next, right? So you enjoy the journey, and you see what the next steps are.
Yeah, absolutely. A really amazing perspective to share as well. Obviously, you don't want to go through these extremely challenging and scary times, but they leave you with some important perspectives and mindsets that I think are important, great to share. But and Jon, while you're in good health, and Mark, also great to hear your wife is on the other side. I did not know that, so it's awesome. Well, Jon, what is next for you? How are you taking these experiences and your perspective and using that to kind of push you forward for what you hope to be next?
So there's always super short term, medium term, and long term. So super short term, when I drop off of this podcast, I'm jumping in my car and headed down to the Capitals game tonight. So that's the super short term. Midterm, we got a lot of really great things in front of us at Ultra INC this year. This is our year where the rubber hits the road on all of the foundations we built in 2023 to drive the outsized growth that the business needs and should be delivering. And so, really, really excited for that. I'd love to tell you that in my golf game this year, I was going to consistently play under 90 and maybe flirt with 80 at some point. But I don't know. You just don't know. Those who play golf know what I'm talking about, right? And those of you who think it's easy, you'll think I'm a chump because it's hard to get under 90. And those of you who have struggled with it know what I'm talking about. Longer term, Amanda, there was a time when I had my whole career planned out, and I was going to be at the top of industry. And then I learned along the way that journey is actually way more important than the destination. What'll happen when, INC, we're a private equity owned company. It'll eventually be purchased by somebody. What'll happen then? I'm not sure. Whatever it is, it'll be the right thing. It'll provide a new and interesting opportunity, and I'll be looking for what's the opportunity, to go learn and to expand myself and to go contribute to do something that I wake up in the morning and I'm excited to do. And I actually kind of like having the short and midterm knowing exactly what needs to happen, and the long term saying, to some extent, let's figure that out. Let's figure that out when we get there, because the journey is super exciting, and don't miss it because you're so focused on a long-term destination.
Awesome. Well, before we close, Mark, is there any other questions?
I was just simply going to say, Jon, with you being a Caps fan and having season tickets, I'm a Red Wings fan, so you and I are similarly gluttons for punishment in terms of mediocrity of season. and I have golf clubs up in my office there in Tyson, so if you ever want to go out and hack the ball around.
Well, so first, never turn down an opportunity to go play golf, and second, if you're at one of my closest friends is he's from Michigan, so he is a Wings fan, but he's a real Michigan fan. He's a Lions fan and all those things. So he's really glutton for punishment, as I'm sure you understand. And so he's one of those true diehard Michigan people. But when the Wings come to town, because we have season tickets. So I'm pretty sure that he's going to that game. So if you decide to go down to the game, let me know, and we'll end up there for a drink. But and I will absolutely take you up on the time to go play golf. That'd be great.
All right.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you so much for sharing your professional and personal journey with us. Again, I'm very glad to hear you're in good health, and that thanks for sharing that perspective. And Mark, thank you so much for co-hosting with me.
Always enjoy it. Jon, thanks for the time. Amanda, talk to you soon.
Yep, thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Humble Beginnings. Check out WashingtonExec.com to find more of our podcasts and profiles on executives. See you next time.